I want to welcome you back to another episode of what I've branded Pivotal, since these interview style segments tackle impactful CPG industry topics and lessons from business leaders that live it every day. My guest on this episode is registered dietitian and the founder CEO of Uplift Food, Kara Landau. She was the absolute perfect guest to help me dive into the uber important functional CPG trend of gut health. Kara and I talked about how her company is making gut health approachable, how our health starts at the gut, and why taking an early investment from Mondelez International has helped her make an impact on big CPG product development. We also tackle the fascinating convergence of psychobiotics and psychedelics that could be an important element in the future of mental health. These are just a few of the interesting topics discussed in this episode, but without further delay, here is my recent conversation with founder and CEO of Uplift Food, Kara Landau. So I've been kind of weaving gut health, like trend spotting content into my catalog for several years, but I've honestly not leaned into it nearly enough in terms of like how important it is. And to be completely honest, I think anytime there's a kind of a subject, being on the science side, that is continually kind of evolving and there's tons of new things going on and we're still trying to figure out everything, like my business brain kind of lights up with this like imposter syndrome sometimes because I'm like, that maybe that's not for me to be the one that's creating these super deep, insightful pieces of content. But that being said, I think these new segments that I'm doing in terms of, kind of bringing on an expert guest and us having a dynamic conversation, I think it's kind of the perfect platform to explore this topic. And I'm super excited to be speaking today with the registered dietitian and founder and CEO of Uplift Foods, Kara Landau, which I've been following for a few years. And also, I don't know if you noticed this when I was asking for people to come on and ask for suggestions from some of my community, you came highly requested to us for us to speak. So I'm super excited for us to speak together. So welcome, Kara.
Thank you. That's very humbling and nice to know that other people were suggesting I join you. I've been following along your work too, so I think that we're in for a fun conversation today. I'm expecting.
So I think with this, maybe post-pandemic world, consumers as a whole have been trying to pack probably more like health, wellness, function into like their consumption, natural consumption behaviors. And I'm maybe not too sure if people really understand how important just the overall benefits of having like a healthy gut is. And this kind of rolls into the first kind of thing that I wanted to ask you, and that was around, or maybe not necessarily a question, maybe just kind of see how you approach this when you were developing your products at Uplift Foods. But it's really the balance between making something that is like approachable or like, I guess, relatable to what the natural consumption behaviors are and how important that is to the overall impact that these products could have. Because you do have like, I think, a ready to mix SKU, but most of your products are food-based, ready to eat type products where that, I guess, delivery format or maybe that form as a whole, the decisions you made ultimately impact how many people could potentially add that into their kind of daily life, normal behaviors. Is that something, I guess, that you thought about when you were first creating the product?
Oh, yes, completely. So at Up to Food, the goal has been to get prebiotics into more people's hands and to get them into their diets so that they can reap these benefits that we speak about when we talk about gut health. And it's one thing to have one supplement and then put it in the back of your cabinet or into the fridge and then it never come out again, or to have a snack food or whichever format it would be that you think, well, I was going to eat something anyway, and then I can enjoy this and I can get that benefit, and it just becomes a part of your everyday life. And I think that's been the challenge and the opportunity all in one of what delivery format, exactly in your words, is going to be the best way to ensure that consumers and more at a mass level will want to incorporate these benefits every day. And so you're right, we started with the Daily Uplifter, which is a powdered supplement, and that was really to ensure that people were ready for a brand that had a messaging around gut health, around the connection between your gut health and your mood, and which is quite, 4 years ago when we launched, it was even more ahead of the time than where it's going now. And so we launched in that space, but my vision had always been to create a prebiotic functional snacking brand. Like, that was where this was going, and that was why after that, the supplement, which we have in 2 SKUs, we didn't start to grow out that line of supplement products. And I've been asked about that a lot, and if we will, and I think when I come back to the core of the brand mission around getting prebiotics into more people's hands and giving them and being the leading prebiotic functional snacking brand, I think it's there in what I've just shared. And so, wanting to find the formats that will resonate, and we've tried, we've got cookies, we've got bites. And when we launched our prebiotic puffs, which was our most recent product, we've found that delivery format certainly has resonated. I think a lot of people, when they think about savory snacking, they can go through a bag of something and really just sort of mindlessly. And here we're actually trying to give you nutrients that you feel very satisfied, and you feel good within your digestion and your gut health following consumption. And that seems to be resonating with people well.
I think I come across this a lot with companies that I work with that are maybe nutritional supplement companies or functional food and functional beverage companies. And you speak to the founder, and they're super passionate about an aspect of that overall kind of wellness dimensions or spectrum. And that maybe passion, or that maybe, I guess, so well connected to it, ends up creating a little bit of like an imbalance of like, okay, this is where I am at as a consumer. I know that I am, maybe so far along where I know how important all these things are, and I know wherever. And then you think about the American market and where I guess the most common consumer is at. They tend to be, eating McDonald's and drinking Coca-Cola, and they are not, if that's point A, and these super functional products, nutritional supplements, are at Z, you have to meet them closer to where they're at. You have to meet them at a place that makes more sense to them. So then when they do, something triggers in their mind to say, I want to make a change, I want to do something that's better for me and healthier for me. It can be a category or a format that is natural for them and relatable to them, and making that shift and it being just as good of a taste, and it's perfect for the way that they're going to consume. Like, that's, you got to kind of meet the consumer where it is. I know that a lot of people will talk about that in the sense of, I guess, sales channels and where the consumer is shopping at, but I do think you also have to think about, is the consumer ready for this big leap? And when you're talking about the cookies, or you're talking about the puffs or the bites, those are categories that in the conventional sense people are already consuming, but on the, I guess, the worst end of the nutritional spectrum. So if you can deliver them a product that is relatable and close enough to them taste wise, it's like a home run.
Yeah, we definitely have found, but even at a more broad level, like not specifically speaking to Uplift Food, I do think that when it comes even to the type of benefit that you're trying to offer, there will be a different product format that the consumer will be more ready to meet you at. And that can come down to, because the nutrient specifically, or the health benefit that you're trying to confer, they would think, oh, that could make sense at that time of day, or in that format. And what I mean by that is, when we look at gut health, a lot of people do associate that, whether they should or not, with in the morning. You sometimes hear influencers online suggesting you only consume these supplements in the morning. Or you hear, people think about Greek yogurt, and they think about kefir, and they think about these things where they naturally probiotics were there, and they think of that as gut health, and therefore what other products could fit in with that, just as an example. And so I think that's also really interesting when you then think about, when do people think they're going to eat? Again, we're using Uplift, but it doesn't need to be. But what time of day would they eat pups, or what time of day would they eat cookies, or when would they eat granolas, and then working out the benefit, that meets them. So in agreement with everything you've said, but then also thinking about the time of day that people associate the benefit, and that can come down to even things as simple as protein, or when something can have more sugar or less sugar or something like that.
I totally agree with you. And I think, I may be even putting my own bias in this, but my first, I guess, introduction into gut health when I was, a young kid was through the idea of yogurt. And that yogurt typically, I think, is a breakfast, maybe occasion for a lot of people. And the fact that up until these last couple of years, breakfast unfortunately has been skipped a lot. Maybe people weren't necessarily thinking about attaching gut health in the right manner anymore. Like there was a disconnect that was happening. So now it's like rewiring some of those occasions and saying it's not just some early morning routine thing. It's something that you can help yourself throughout a number of different times or consumption behaviors, if it's a nighttime snack or whatever. And I think this kind of maybe rolls into something that I was thinking about before, and not necessarily asking you this question as the founder of Uplift Food, but more of as like a thought leader and somebody that follows this space extremely closely. I guess, what are your thoughts on some of these maybe like gut health focused adjacent categories that are growing quickly? I'm thinking in my head, and these maybe not are all like prebiotic, they could be postbiotic or something like that, but in the sense of maybe these like prebiotic sodas, or even like hard kombuchas, or maybe like fermented foods that have been integrated into maybe some of these categories like condiments. Do you think of those categories that you're not necessarily maybe playing in now, maybe you will in the future? Like, do you think of them as like, these are my brothers and sisters in arms that are like pushing, this great area of nutrition and health that we all need to like know more about?
I want to say yes, and in most of the cases, it's a yes. When it feels like it's straight marketing, it can be very cringeworthy to someone who, I know you said not as the founder, but as the founder of a brand, but even before I launched Uplift Food, as a registered dietitian, as someone who worked with food brands and really tried to like instill, please have some integrity. It can be very hard to watch people making misleading marketing claims around, and often you do find, it's very clear, we can use the beverage space. I'm not going to name names, but like there are brands that have prebiotics in their products that are truly functional prebiotics, and like good on them for bringing more of that into the world. And I 100% see them as my allies, and, and people that I want to help lift up, and I want them to be, I like the association with my own brand, and I could put my name to their brand. And then you have other products where you go at the expo booths and you ask even the founding team to like say, well, which ingredient is your prebiotic in your product? And either there is none, and so they are listing off something that is because you Googled it and it's not accurate, or they actually say like a wrong ingredient, which just goes to show there's like, and because the ingredient they have is not in any sort of officious like level, and it becomes a little bit, I don't want to say a joke, but it's upsetting to the category. And so I think that's something that I work with the Global Prebiotic Association, and there is many discussions internally around, and yes, this is about prebiotics, but as you say, it could be around fermented foods, and there's other associations that are in regards to probiotics and postbiotics, and I just think that we all just really, we want to lift the space together, and we want people to be able to access these nutrients and these benefits in as many ways as possible that fit within their everyday lives. Like, why would I not want someone to make a better choice for themselves if that's going to benefit ultimately their lives and their health? But at the same time, it does need to be true to its word, and I think that that's where there's a bit of a grey zone as there's less and less barriers to launch products into the market.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's, anytime you see these, I guess, big growth rates in any category, or just kind of like, sometimes you lump a bunch of small subcategories into one kind of category. But if you are somebody that's maybe a bad actor, you're looking at that and you're saying, I could take advantage of this through some marketing angle or something, and maybe not in it for the reasons that you're in it, in the sense of like, maybe they don't necessarily are all that worried about people's gut health. They're looking at it as, I could put a spin on a product that is going to align within what people are searching for, and I'm going to get a bunch of purchases off it, which is, it's something that, as somebody that started their career in nutritional supplements, it just like really, I would say, pisses me off a little bit. Excuse my French. It's one of those things where, I hate when founders and products and things are not necessarily aligned with, how do we make the consumer's life better? That should be the main goal here. It shouldn't be, a bad actor is looking at it and trying to get, some commercial value off of it.
Mhm. And I do think that as time goes on, consumers have access to more information. There is more transparency being requested and expected of the brands. For companies, especially when you start out smaller, like the founders can kind of, their name is attached to the brand, and that can work as a good thing, or it can ultimately not look so great. But I think that at the end of the day, it really comes down to how much value consumers will place on that integrity, because in order for these mission-driven businesses to survive and thrive and have the impact they're wanting, the consumers need to spend where they're saying what they're saying they want. That needs to transfer into dollars spent, and there's this balancing act of whose responsibility is it. I've thought that for a long time. I feel like as a brand, it's on me to put the best products I can out there. There's others that say, well, the consumer, especially with like large CPG, is it the consumer's dollar driving something that then they will then move into that space? Or can they say, we want to take a lead and we have so much influence on the food supply and the food industry that we could create these better for you products to help the consumers move into that space, and at more approachable price points and all sorts of things based on scale. So I just find it such an interesting cycle where everyone fits into that, and ultimately I feel like things kind of go in a wave. Like the more momentum that any space gets between the consumer's voice, the food industry's voice, the new brands all together, that's when you really can force and bring about change.
And that kind of transitions where I'm thinking here is that, I think this has really been started and driven by emerging and upstart CPG founders. But to make even the impact that you want, and I think a lot of people want, like, it needs to be, shepherded or championed as well with some of this big CPG. Like, they need to care about gut health. They need to care about some of these things. And I think that these biggest companies, I mean, they have the most distribution scale, they have the most marketing dollars, they have the, I guess, products that are being consumed at the most quantity that could make small incremental changes to, that could make huge impacts. Now, will they ever be as, efficacious or as great as some of these emerging companies that come out and create these products? Maybe not, but I think there's a step up that I think needs to happen over time with anything. I know we're talking a lot about gut health, but I think there's a ton of different similar areas that, if big CPG embraced them, it could help society at such a level.
I completely agree. I've always felt that way, and that's why, even as a dietitian, I remember when I started out, there was often like a little bit internally within the industry. It was that if you worked with the food industry, it was like you were going against what you were, and I always felt, as did some of my peers, that we could have the greatest impact on the food supply and therefore on people's lives by working with the food industry and trying to have that influence internally, or as I've now gone the route of completely going off on my own. But with Uplift, I partnered with Mondelez International. They are a minority investor. We have had opportunities with some of the largest distributors in the US who have come to us to help with gut health, new formulations of products that, are yet to be released and will be, that, by tapping into these people that already have distribution scale, it really helps, me and Uplift's mission of getting these nutrients into people's hands take flight in a way that, as a startup, it's far and few between that really can have that sort of impact. And so I hear what you're saying in terms of, the large company is not going to just do a national rollout at a mass scale of the clinically proven prebiotic dose in one of their product lines. I suspect the brand manager for those products would be like, not a chance we're taking that risk. And I don't know, but I suspect that's what would happen. Whereas, like, as a startup, you feel like you have to be a risk taker. You're not going to be in this role unless you're a risk taker. And so you feel like I'm okay to be the one that pushes the envelope. But I do think that, by showing and being very close by some of these larger corporations, you teach them as much as they teach you. And when they see, if they can see that there's a consumer that is willing to spend and is investing in that, and they can see all the data points, then it becomes a business. And whether their initial reason behind it had just as much heart as, as the founder, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it's probably it's not able to be the case just because of the roles that we have all chosen to take in our careers. But that doesn't mean that we can't ultimately come together, and that some of the people internally at these big corporations don't ultimately want to improve the supply chain. Like there are people in there that are parents themselves or are into fitness or whatever their particular pillar is, that would love to be able to be a part of championing something like this. So I just think it's about finding the way that we can collaborate rather than being sort of at odds with each other.
The most amount of impact that you're ever going to make is when you're actually able to be in the room and actually have that place to get on your soapbox and explain why these things are most important. Because though I think they maybe are all aware of it in some fashion, it really takes somebody that's super passionate, that it is their kind of life's work, to explain to them exactly why these things are important to the overall society, and also be realistic to the fact that they might not see that clear vision like you do exactly right now, but the more that you stay in that room and the more that you explain things and the more that momentum and all these trends start to go in the right direction, be it, I guess, the bad trends or the good trends, with health concerns and things, like, it starts to make more sense. But if you just think, well, I can work outside of that system, I don't know if you're going to be able to make a big of an impact as being inside the room and kind of infecting it. And that's a bad word, but like, being able to make that impact when you're inside of those rooms, over than just, being the, quote unquote challenger brand on the outside, trying to pick fun at them. Like, I think there's a better way to approach it.
I agree. I have found that, when I even originally, I'll use the Mondelez example, but there has been, as I've mentioned, like other corporate partners that I've created opportunities with. Before they invested in the company, I actually proposed, why don't you support me with some R&D with your expertise, and why don't I, as a registered dietitian, go and like share some of my knowledge with your R&D team that could technically help them produce competitive products. They had no actual equity in my company. It wasn't a financial exchange at that point. It was, I'm going to share my brain, where I got to help with lower sugar options, showing them less artificial, the natural flavor options that could really be more natural rather than these artificial things that claim they're natural. Like, there were so many parts to the conversation where I felt like I would like to impact the food supply. I would, which again, like, if it was business versus business, you might not want to find a way to work together and to share that knowledge. But here it was coming to the table and saying, I've got knowledge that's even beyond what I'm doing at Uplift Food, and I would like to support the food industry if this will support consumers at large. And in the process, I'm able to access, these brilliant minds that really have far more expertise in developing a product than I do. And, I just think there's so many creative ways that we can all work together that often get missed because people, they just look at what jobs are posted or at what accelerators are available or whatever it is, when really, like, if you understand the pain point internally at different companies or what they're trying to chase or whatever it is, the more you can then offer in return.
I definitely agree wholeheartedly with that. And I know we've been weaving in and out of, kind of product and strategy and kind of partnerships and a bunch of other areas, but I want to kind of take a step back, more towards, like, I guess your, dietitian background, and get your sense of, where you think overall, and maybe we'll just focus on the American market and just that consumer, those diets, like, where are they at in the sense of understanding how important, like, the gut is, in the sense of, like, everything, if that is with the brain, the heart, the lungs, even some oral, like, there's so many things that maybe are misunderstood, or maybe there's so many nuances to it that maybe people are not understanding how that's really I guess the core of us as humans, and how that impacts everything.
Mm. I think that at a mass level, there is still such a way to go. And I definitely can see that there is a positive association being made with gut health. Like, there is people, when they think of gut health, they're like, if something's promoted as good for your gut health, oh, that's good for me. If they have the level of detail of which nutrient at what level and all that, that's where it comes down to just trust in the company, that what they're providing and what they're saying. There is an earlier adopter. There is definitely a wave of consumers who look for specific amounts of prebiotics in their products, who look for, and I'm just going on data that I know from surveys and things in that space. So, sorry if it's only more focused on prebiotics, but it's, there is at a mass level, there's still a way to go. But even the fact that, look, not all fibers are prebiotic and not all prebiotics are fiber, to state. However, there is definitely fiber that used to be a very unsexy nutrient is finally starting to be, people like, oh, it's got fiber. That's good for me. That's a good thing to include. I think that between all the crap that's been in the food supply, that then when people start to, they think of gut health a lot of the time connected to digestive health, which they're not one and the same, but that is the tie that they make. And the digestive health piece you can feel immediately. So if you have truly gut healthy products, you will feel a digestive health benefit, or you'll feel a transition if it's your gut is really off, and then you'll get to a good place. And so by feeling that benefit, it pushes people to then come back again for more. So I think that what I'm saying is that now at least you're seeing brands and products pushing the fiber message, which 10 years ago was not being done. It was more associated with cardboard tasting, crackers and things that people were like, okay, fine, I'll eat it, but they didn't want it. And now you've got emerging brands, you've got large brands, you've got delicious products that front and center on their packets are saying this is high in fiber. And and then moving along from that, we can see prebiotics going in the front of pack, we can see probiotics. So I think that it's coming. It's only gotten, from when I start, I've been in this space for 15 years, and I can definitely say it is significantly further along than it has ever been. And it's not that it's slowing down at all. It's more like it's at that tipping point of mass. And I genuinely think that the allies in the prebiotic soda space and in some of these other categories have really been helping with that momentum. I think that it's a positive thing. And now it's about working out, back to the very beginning of our conversation, which formats will we be able to get these benefits into for the consumer that they will most easily be able to understand, and therefore go back again and again for more.
I love the point you brought up around, digestive health. And I kind of relate that to, anytime there's a product that has like a sensory effect, or something that's super easy to understand, where you have a quick impact, where people aren't waiting around for some cumulative lifestyle change. It's, in a way, the gateway drug, where ultimately, like, that's what gets people to understand this gut health category as a whole. But for the most, I guess, impactful parts of it, there needs to be maybe lifestyle changes or some type of indicators or and this maybe rolls into the question around even like personalization, but more from the sense of, if you were to get to, maybe the gut heart or the gut lung connection, or even really, kind of the gut brain type things, like maybe, through wearables or testing, which now I think is a lot more normalized because of what happened with the pandemic. Like, you have all of those kind of data points that maybe feed into people understanding, oh, these are improving, and it's because of these, gut microbiota type based, or just positive type diets that all feed into this, where maybe it's just not digestion, it's things that are above and beyond. And those are probably more leaning towards like these early adopters, as you'd said. I mean, anybody that's probably going to, test their blood or test their stool or, anything like that is probably somebody that's a little bit more further along in their health and wellness journey. But I am interested in how all that's moving. And I know like you're dealing with more the generalization and focusing on how do I make the most amount of impact through, these non, I guess, personalized products. But I do think, as this all evolves, it's interesting how those maybe could play into each other.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're seeing in terms of some of the testing companies partnering up with either product supplements, usually with supplement because it is an early adopter, and so they're then creating personalized supplements to fit with the consumer based on all the data points. And I think, as you said, like me personally, and I've probably always been like this, even though I did have a private practice at one point where it really was one-on-one, but at the end of the day, we do all have different microbiomes, and therefore, and we have, everything is different, obviously. And I find that, I think that's why I veered towards prebiotics more than probiotics, even in itself, because prebiotics acted more as a preventative measure. They feed the diverse probiotics that we already have inside of us, and yet they're dying off because the diets did not, everyone's regular diets, from birth, we're not including these nutrients that we need, and therefore you're then trying to guess, or you're going to take lots of tests to then guess which 1, 2, 3 strains of probiotics, when we've got so many strains, like those 1 or 2, it's not necessarily going to be the exact one that each specific person needs, and they end up fighting for space and nutrients within our gut anyway. But then if you start to kind of, I believe at this point it becomes a bit of a guessing game, that I think that there's still a longer way to go to get to when we really will be able to make truly beneficial, everything personalized. And I'm all for that. And particularly in the medical part of this and the clinical part, I think that is so valuable. But when it comes to the food and the beverage side of things, I think that at the end of the day, like I said at the very beginning, if you've got, when you think of the percentage of the population that consumes supplements versus the percentage of the population that eats food and drinks beverages, I think that would be where I sit on which products should be turned into personalized products versus which should be looking at more of how to get more people to consume them. Very much like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think in terms of, if we look at personalized nutrition, or even further than that with attaching personalized medicine, and how tech and data and all these things should be constantly speaking to each other. Like we're well far off from like that one-to-one aspect. I mean, if somebody wants a one-to-one treatment, they have to really go to a doctor or a dietitian, or somebody that's a professional at this point. At least in my mind, I think a lot of it is not there yet for this grand vision of Jetsons, or whatever, like this, where most people think about it as, is like that everybody's going to be truly personalized, from the food to the supplements to the medicine to just even external, internal kind of inputs that are constantly moving. Like, how do you always evolve and kind of adapt to those things? We're not anywhere near that yet, but I do think my mind goes in that direction a lot, just because I think if we were ever to get to that point, which I think, it's silly to think that we can evolve in that area, that it could make a huge impact to just a lot of what's happening with nutrition-based, medical conditions. But I wanted to kind of transition, and I made the joke about saying the gateway drug, and I wanted to kind of talk about an emerging area that that I didn't really realize was converging. I was kind of more getting interested into the, I guess, like mental health treatment, all kind of medicine side of like psychedelics and how that space has been evolving over time, most recently probably the last couple of years. And we're tearing down a lot of that war on drugs Reagan era stuff that maybe we should relook at a lot of these different drugs for mental health applications. But when I think a few months ago or something, you had posted something about the combination or just the convergence between that side of it, the psychedelics side of it, and then also like these like psychobiotic, like more like the mental aspect of how this kind of live bacteria, how that all plays together. And I thought it was super interesting because I'm like, this is, I didn't really realize that there's two ways that can be put together that actually would make even a bigger impact than just kind of one on its own.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. And you can see here in New York, there's clinics opening up that are starting to be able to working with practitioners to do some psychedelic treatments, and then with a lot of evidence around, being a very valuable way to work to improve your mental well-being, anxiety, stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, etc. And then the psychobiotic space is also in terms of which probiotics, prebiotics, which postbiotics can play a part into improving our mental health and that gut-brain connection, which is clearly evident at this point. So what I have found, really incredible is how, there is science that shows, after one psychedelic experience, that then, partner that up with gut healthy nutrients and as a treatment per se, it shows longer term changes in terms of the type of bacteria that are in our gut and the types of byproducts that they're producing that can help with the reduction of the inflammation, which is associated with and connected to anxiety and depression. And that's just fascinating because we know that these on the gut health space, we know that these nutrients do play a direct role. What we're feeding the gut bacteria will affect what they produce and those inflammatory markers and the short chain fatty acids and everything on that side. And we also know separately that psychedelics can completely change. They change your brain wiring. They, in a really positive way, they can promote neurogenesis. They can help you become less attached to particular outcomes, or just the way that some of them switch off our default mode network at the front of our brain. It allows parts of your brain that didn't used to think or did used to think when we were babies and children, but then sort of stop operating, to think that you can then get some of those rewirings taking place as an adult, which can often be, I don't need to go into psychologist mode here, but that can be part of the stress that adults are living with, that they think something should be a certain way and yet it's not. And so if we can sort of work with that and get your gut bacteria working together, and the fact that they are literally then working together because the molecules that are being sent to your brain is just, I find, incredible. And so I will personally certainly be following along the science of that and wanting to see what things can come together. I think that not in the psychedelic space, but even with CBD and in the cannabis space, because I feel like that was sort of the one before the psychedelics in terms of opening up the legalization, or at least it not being illegal to incorporate, and people, like you said, in terms of people feeling a benefit from the very beginning. From when you consume something, I think that is a draw card to some of the CBD beverages, or, in the States where they have THC, people feel something. And so just like, the nootropics, you sometimes become more alert, or, with some of the herbal things that you then feel calmer. I think that pulling it all together is that when you think about what are consumers looking for? If they're looking for a benefit, they're not necessarily looking for a nutrient, they're looking for the benefit. And then you're thinking, how will they feel this quickly? Because consumers want to feel something and it's all immediate. Then how do we partner that up all together? But at the core of it, if you're a company or a brand or a person who wants to have ongoing and long-term benefits, And like you said, there's some benefits that are cumulative. They take time to start to reap the health benefits. You have to consume it for a couple of months. But if you can sort of partner up with something that people feel immediately, then they'll keep coming back for more. And then they can also reap the benefits 2-3 months later of the other benefits that were associated with some of the other nutrients in the products. And I think ultimately, like I would love to see the food industry be able to go in that direction. I think the supplement industry will be able to go there first, if at all. But I think that could just change the landscape for people's mental health across the globe, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that, now that I'm kind of thinking about it a little bit more, anytime I've ever in my adult life, I probably was not smart enough to know this when I was younger, but like when I went to a new general practitioner, or I went to a mental health professional or anything like that, I always felt like I was away interviewing them as well to understand, are they going to focus on diet and nutrition and like those types of things before just writing a script for something? Because if they were to just write a script without asking or understanding any of those things, I always kind of felt they just weren't for me, or maybe not necessarily attacking the problem in the right way. So when you're talking about attacking from both angles, both from the gut side and from like, I think they have to be put together. Like you have to make lifestyle changes. You can't just take a pill or take whatever and magically it's going to work for you. I mean, I don't care if it's a supplement, or I don't care if it's a pharmaceutical. I don't care wherever. I mean, you have to make changes to the root causes of these issues. And if you can attack that, then these, be it ingredients or be it compounds or whatever, they work way better. They work so much better if you can just dial in some of those other kind of lifestyle changes first.
Yeah.
So when you're kind of talking through that, it made a lot more sense to me, because I don't necessarily know if I explored that other side of it, or maybe it was just that a lot of the articles and things that I was reading or people I've been talking to were more focused on how do we get this through legalization, and they're not really necessarily thinking about how does this all play into the bigger system of food, and ultimately could some of these ingredients or compounds be added into typical food and beverage FDA type stuff, like who knows? But I agree with you. I think if it ever gets to that point, it could be monumental to like reverse even the last 2 years of just normal people's stress, things that just really, I don't know if we even know how this all impacted us. It's going to be something we're going to have to look back hindsight and go, oh well, that was the trigger that happened all this thing. So this could be essentially aligning hopefully with us being able to apply it and help what happened over this. I guess that's a hope. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I'm with you. I'm
not a
hoping.
lobbyist or anything, but that's that's the hope. And get a little bit I don't want to say fearful, but I tried to keep my, I guess, like political bias out of the way. But my thing is like I'm all about just let adults consume things as they need based around the help that they're seeking, and let's not try to villainize all the things, especially the most helpful ones. So I try not to add that in there, but I think it's just like people can read between the lines probably pretty
Yeah.
quickly on that one. So,
No, well, there's a lot of things that are legal that are definitely very, very clearly bad for people's mental health and their health in general. And it's amazing that they are legal for consumption, and yet there are. And I'm not a lobbyist either, but there are people that are very intelligent that have been looking at the science in some of these areas for years on end. There is major universities doing research studies that show so many benefits, and yet there's red tapes everywhere. And so I think it can sometimes be confusing as to why there is a red tape somewhere and why it's not somewhere else. And I'm sure there's people that have been in the CBD and the cannabis industry for many years that probably felt those ways as well. And I think that hopefully just with new generations coming into positions of influence and being able to determine the changes that get made, that should be able to assist, bringing all this science together for more people to be able to access the benefits.
totally agree. Kara, I appreciate everything, the time you gave me. I know you were traveling, came back and made time for me on this. I thought our conversation was extremely insightful, fascinating. I know anybody that's following this will agree. So I just want to again just kind of thank you for everything.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this YouTube video. If you did, consider hitting the like button to support me. Also, help me get to my short term goal of 2,000 subscribers by hitting the subscribe button. I'd love to see you join me on this journey, but we need to fix the fact that slightly less than 70% of you that are watching this YouTube video right now are not subscribed to my channel, and that makes me extremely sad. But thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.